All right, we are back for the second half of our section on cyber economic crime, and we're going to talk in this subsection about identity theft. Now, identity theft takes a lot of different forms, okay? But it all relies upon some bad actor finding your PII, personally identifying information, okay? And this can be your social security number, your um, credit card numbers, your driver's license number, all that kind of thing, right? And there are tons of ways they can obtain this and tons of ways they can use this to their advantage um, to try to make money off of you or to try to use and abuse your um, uh, that information for their own purposes, right? One of my wife many years ago had somebody steal her social security number just to get a clean credit history so they could rent an apartment, right? So it didn't deny my wife anything. Uh, it would have if that person had then not paid their rent. It would have hurt my wife's credit score. But luckily we caught it before that happened. But there's lots of different ways this can be used. So employment or tax fraud. Sometimes it's as simple as stealing somebody's social security number so that you can gain employment, whether it's because you can't find a job because you're a felon, or you're wanted for a crime, or you're an undocumented immigrant or something, and you need a social security number in order to get and hold a job, so you steal somebody else's. You can also use it for tax fraud, getting the tax return. If somebody stole my social security number, they might be able to pretend to be me, file a tax return, get my tax return cash check sent to them instead of to me. Credit card fraud, either by stealing somebody's credit card numbers and just using their already existing credit cards to purchase a whole bunch of goods, and then either those goods are just taken, or they're very commonly then you purchase a good with somebody's credit card and then you sell that good for almost what you paid for it, but you keep all that cash. So even if you sell it for 75% of what you bought it for zero of your money. So that 75% you then resold it for is all profit. Or you can apply for and receive new credit cards, right? So if somebody got my social security number and all my information, they could apply for a credit card in my name, have it sent to them, and then run up a whole bunch of charges on it that I wouldn't even know about. Because if somebody steals my credit card right now, I could check online for my credit card accounts, or a lot of times the credit card company will just call me and say, hey, there's some suspicious charges on your account. So that would get dealt with relatively quickly. But if they made a credit card going to their own address and cell phone, which is usually like a P.O. box and a burner phone, they can run up thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars in the victim's name without the victim even knowing about it. Phone or utilities fraud. This is where they can set up fake phone numbers, fake utilities, using so they can have a burner phone not connected to them, or funnel money to a fraudulent business. You can do bank fraud, right? If somebody pretends to be me, they could walk into my bank and empty my bank accounts and take all the cash, or set up a new bank account and write a bunch of faulty checks on that bank account, and then when they figure out, when they come after the person who owes them money, they'll come after me instead of the person who actually did it. There's health insurance fraud. Somebody can either pretend to be me to try to get a bunch of health care in my name that I then get charged for, or sometimes more commonly, they'll partner up with a doctor who's kind of less than reputable in order to give the scammer maybe pain medication and have that charged to me, or my health insurance, or just a bunch of treatments that didn't actually happen, and then the scammer and the doctor they're partnering with get to kind of split that money. And then, of course, there's identity theft to conceal your identity from law enforcement, right? So law enforcement frequently has to deal with people who say, oh, I don't have my driver's license on me, I don't have my identification, but my name is such and such, my driver's license number is such and such. And that's fake. They're just using the name and driver's license number or social security number or whatever of somebody they know who they know is not wanted by the police, because they are wanted by the police. And if they gave the police their real name and real social security number, real driver's license number, they'd go to prison for, whatever warrant they have, whatever they're wanted by the police for. And then, of course, in post 9/11, there was a huge fear of terrorism. And so law enforcement is constantly worried about people's PII being used to help terrorists either enter the country or live here while they're setting up their terrorist attack, or gain access to, buildings or areas that they're not supposed to have access to, but they get access thanks to this stolen PII, things like that. Now, you have to worry about not only your existing accounts, i.e. my current bank account, my current credit card number, my current, video game accounts, all those things. But also you have to be on the lookout for new accounts being made by the offender in the victim's name. And as I said, or at least implied on the last slide, that's often a lot harder to detect, because if somebody takes over my current accounts, I try to keep an eye on those. And if something goes wrong, the company has a way to contact me by phone or email or whatever. So those are usually dealt with relatively quickly. But with a new account, if the phone number and the email address either goes nowhere or goes to the offender, that can take a lot longer for the victim to notice, for the company to realize that the person who signed up for the account isn't the actual person with that name and social security number or whatever. And then one of the worst things about identity theft is, very commonly, in fact, I would argue a vast majority of the time, victims don't know how they're victims, right? I had a credit card number stolen, probably 5 years ago now, at least 2-3 years ago. And to this day, I have no idea how the offender obtained my credit card number. There's lots of different ways they could do it. Somebody I gave my credit card to, somebody working at a restaurant or a business could have taken that credit card, swiped it through their business's machine to charge me for what I was trying to pay for, and then also swiped it through their own machine that just records the number. Or they could have had a fake credit card machine over on top of a real credit card machine at a gas pump or a ATM, right? This is called skimming. You put a specialized piece of hardware over top of the credit card reader on, say, a gas pump or an ATM machine. And then when a victim comes up to that machine, they insert their credit card, and it not only goes into the real credit card reader, but it also passes through your fake credit card reader that steals all the information off of that card. And then the victim, unless they notice that there's some additional piece of hardware over top of that credit card reader, they may never realize that they just got their credit card number stolen, right? Or maybe some company that I did business with got hacked and all their customer records were stolen by an offender, and they got tons and tons and tons of credit card numbers that they were then able to clone and use. And then, there's also really low-tech ways to do it. It's not all hacking and fancy machinery and all those things. It could be as simple as somebody going through my trash and finding some piece of paper that had my credit card number or social security number or whatever on it that I just threw away and forgot to shred. Maybe they just kind of looked over my shoulder as I was typing in my credit card number. There's lots and lots of low-tech ways to capture this PII. Maybe my wife has her purse stolen and somebody uses those credit cards and her driver's license and all those things. So there's both high-tech and low-tech ways to do this. And again, the vast majority of the time, the victim has no idea how their PII was actually obtained by the offender, and thus they don't know what they can change about their behavior to protect themselves, right? If we know how and when we were victimized, we can take steps to make sure that doesn't happen again. But for instance, me, I have no idea how the offender got my credit card number, so I have no idea what I can do, what I can change to protect myself from having that happen again, or even if that's possible. If some business that I did, that I purchased something from with my credit card got their servers hacked, I mean, that's really not my fault. I guess I could not shop at that business anymore, but really any business is susceptible to that on some level. So outside of never using my credit cards again, there's no real way to protect yourself from that kind of thing. So it's really difficult. Now, one of the kind of more disturbing parts of what PII trading has gone into is that now, people can steal so many credit card numbers that there's no way they can kind of utilize or take advantage of all of them themselves, right? We talked about this a little bit in a previous section when I talked about Max Butler, the Iceman. He stole so many credit card numbers that he couldn't utilize them all. He was going as fast as he can, trying to utilize these stolen credit card numbers to turn them into cash, but there was just no way he could utilize them all. So he created an online marketplace to sell those extra stolen credit card numbers to other people who did have the time and ability and energy to utilize them for their own purpose. And of course, that one was taken down a few years later, but that just kind of created a vacuum in which now there are others. If you search around the dark web, which you really shouldn't, please don't, but you could theoretically go online, go onto the dark web and find numerous places where you can purchase or sell different kinds of PII, credit card numbers, social security numbers, driver's licenses, all that stuff is for sale. And there's no way to know, or it's very difficult to know, if my information is for sale on any of those websites. But the modern websites where you can purchase this stuff have all the really fancy features of, the legitimate marketplaces, the Amazon.coms and the eBay and all those things. So you can have buyer and seller ratings on these websites, just like you would on Amazon or eBay or wherever. So if I don't, if I say I'm selling something and then I sell it and it turns out to be not a legitimate credit card number, I might get my seller rating dropped, and thus fewer people are willing to buy from me. So it's in my interest to actually give what I'm saying I'm selling. Same thing with buying, right? So it's all those fancy features that you think of when you think of really high-end, really nice, really completely legitimate online businesses are now available and, in fact, common on these illegal marketplaces as well. And one of those things is escrow, right? So for those of you who don't know what escrow means there's a trusted middleman that will hold the money. So essentially, the buyer and the seller agree to a price for a product. Maybe it's $10 for a Visa card number. The buyer sends the money to that trusted third party, usually the website or somebody working for the website that's hosting the transaction. The seller then sends the buyer that thing they've purchased. And once the buyer says, oh, yes, this is exactly what they promised me, then that middleman, that escrow account holder, will send the buyer's money to the seller, and everybody has what they wanted. It's much more difficult for one or the other to scam the buyer, or the seller to scam the other. And it makes online transactions much more trustworthy. But it just blows my mind that these kind of things are not only happening on, again, legitimate websites, but also these places where you can buy and sell and trade illegal goods. Everything from PII to drugs to guns to, child porn to whatever. Now, the good news is identity theft is, I guess, common enough and old enough at this point that it's one of the relatively few cybercrimes that every single state in the United States now has a law against, plus the federal government has laws against it. So no matter where you are in the United States, at least, if you try to commit these crimes, there are state and federal laws that they can use to prosecute and investigate. Local, state, and federal police are legally able to investigate and arrest. Now, both in the United States and in the vast majority of jurisdictions, if you're found guilty of committing any of these e-commerce crimes, you can be ordered to pay restitution, i.e., try to pay back your victims from what you took from them. The bad news is, the vast majority of the time, they don't have anywhere near enough money to cover all of their victims, right? So people who are doing this a lot, people who are doing this in kind of a major way, they'll have, $10 million worth of victims, but when they get arrested and caught and prosecuted, they only have, a tiny fraction of that left. And even if the government sells off all their, all the fancy stuff they bought, they're still only going to have a small fraction of enough money to pay back the victims. So a lot of victims will either get, some fraction of what they lost, or even nothing at all. So hopefully, if you've ever been a victim and they do catch the offender, you get at least some of it back. Occasionally you can get all of your money back, but it's relatively rare. Even if the court does order restitution, just the nature of money, they usually just don't have anywhere near enough of it left to pay back all of their victims. Now, the investigation of financial crimes. Here in the United States, there's numerous different agencies that investigate this. Obviously, local and state law enforcement are going to investigate it, and they're kind of, generalists. At the federal level, there's a few different groups that are focused on some aspects of this kind of crime. The Secret Service, contrary to popular belief, the primary goal of the Secret Service is not to protect the president. They do that, but that is one of their secondary kind of purposes as an agency. Their main goal, their main focus as a law enforcement agency is the investigation of financial crimes. So they obviously are going to investigate lots and lots and lots of financial crimes online, whether they take place, in person, online, with only one of the two, offender or victim, in the United States, or both offender and victim in the United States. They're going to be one of the lead agencies at any federal investigation of any of these e-commerce economic crimes. In fact, at one of my previous jobs, I worked at a university that had a digital forensics lab associated with the university, and some of their biggest cases they ever worked at that digital forensics lab was for the Secret Service, investigating some kind of financial crimes. I remember there was one case where they were investigating somebody selling fraudulent gold coins via the internet. So, this person would, take these coins that were either just gold plated or just gold colored and sell them as if they were real gold online. And we were part of the investigation, helping out the Secret Service with some digital forensics work tied to that case. It was a really fascinating case. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they do a lot of identity theft investigations, and they do a lot of terrorism investigations. Obviously, especially post 9/11, The FBI got way more into terrorism investigations even than they were prior. And they, if somebody is stealing driver's licenses in order to try to get, or passports, trying to get foreign nationals into the United States for purposes of terrorist attacks, they're going to be either the lead agency or one of the lead agencies. And then, of course, ICE and CBP, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or Customs and Border Protection, they have a big role in investigating any time money or goods goes in or out of the country. So all that, fraudulent goods coming in, or, scammed money leaving the country to go to wherever the offender lives. Any cases involving any of that stuff, they will investigate as, again, either the lead agency or one of the possible lead agencies. And then, of course, other countries have their own investigation systems set up for this. In the UK, there's the National Crime Agency, which has a kind of a subset. It's the National Cybercrime Unit. They investigate lots and lots of these e-commerce, economic crimes committed via the internet and identity theft and all those associated crimes. But anyway, that is the end of this section. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, you guys. I know that I can ramble on sometimes, but if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching.